Ooby-doo, it's everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. And today we're going to look at the Canon lens FL 55mm 1.2. FL came out immediately before the FD. And this is like one of the first super fast normal prime lenses made. And I bought this specifically to do astronomy because I like to do a wide field of the star captures of the heavens, and this is the lens you want. Now you can use it for terrestrial things. Well, I suppose so. It has a problem. And as with all these old lenses, they have metal barrels. It's very sensitive to temperature. And look at how big that glass is. That's a gigantic piece of glass. So if you have this in your home at a normal room temperature, you go outside and it's cool, the stars look aberrated. And I noticed that if the camera's inside and they take it out and it's almost the same temperature, then the stars look pretty nice pinpoints. Not exact pinpoints, but much better. So it's the same thing when you're doing terrestrial photography. This is the end of April of 2023. It was the 29th and the 30th. I did this photo shoot, and it was 49 degrees on both occasions when I took this lens out. I had to drive somewhere, so I put bought the camera, put it in the car, drove somewhere. When I went to the park first, it's only a 15-minute drive. Then I walked around, and I was very happy. When I went to the park, I used this lens hood. And that's a big, giant mother lens hood. Now, of course, this is on the SONY A5000, which is a APS-C crop sensor. So you could have a giant, I mean, look at that. That's the angle that it's blocking light from. Now, I went to the park. It was in the afternoon, and it was overcast to almost cloudy bright. So I used this exclusively. It is collapsible, so it was a little drizzly, so I had to put it under my coat. So I collapsed it, and I opened it up for the park. And I think I got excellent results with this. Then I went to the town. I went to the town like between 6 and 7 a.m., and it was definitely overcast, and because the sun was so low in the sky, I felt I didn't need it. The lighting was extremely, extremely even at the town. So I'm using this KNF concept adapter as opposed to this photodiox adapter. I'm going to show you why in a minute. It's locked. So if I want to open it up, I do this, then I do this, and this comes off, right? And then it's this, this says FD to next, but next is the same as the E mount. So let's put this photodiox on. Okay, and it says install. So I'm going to put this lens on. It's lined up. The red dot is lined up there because you put it on like this, right? That's a little tough. Well, I like this one better. They both do infinity focus. And this is, you have to do this to make the lens stop down. So you either, to install or remove, you can put it here. And use the stop down features, you got to go like this. But this lens has an A and an M. So here's A and M. If you put it in M mode, it doesn't matter anything. The aperture is going to stop down as you move it. So I'm going to take this off. Let's take this off. Oh, I didn't have to. Well, let's move to install anyway. Okay. I'm going to put this one back on because I bought this one specially with it. Sometimes it doesn't go all the way. I don't know why. So, and I got this cheap. It was used. So I don't care. It seems so locked, open. Okay, let's put it back on. Then you lock it. It works. Okay. So what I did was I went to the park. It was somewhat brighter out. I was using the ISO 800 because I wanted to eliminate camera shake because, you know, I got the boomer jitters. And I went through the paces from infinity down to what? What did I go down to? I don't know, maybe 3 feet. Although this thing goes down to less than 2 feet. I didn't do any super close-ups. And I was using 5.6, 8, and 11 in the park. But I went to the town, since I was there so much early, and I was using the ISO 400. I was using, I took some pictures at f2 right off the bat. Then I went to 2.8, took some more pictures, and then the rest of them were all at f4. Well, I want to see how it performed wide open as compared to a normal 50 millimeters. This thing is a sharp lens. It's a super sharp lens. It's highly corrected. So if you were to get into vintage lenses, do you need more than 150 or 55 millimeter? No. If you want to get the 1.2, you get the 1.2, and you could use it for all your shooting needs when you need a 50 millimeter. Now, since it was overcast to almost cloudy bright at the park, and it was definitely a heavy overcast to overcast in the town, this is, I was sort of cheating with this lens if it has flare or it suffers the coatings are old coatings and are not as effective as new coatings. So I was in a low contrast situation. And of course I got really good results. Now what I'm going to have to do is take this lens out on a normal sunny day and see how it performs. Of course I'm going to use a lens hood. I like this collapsible one because it's so deep and it seems to really shield from extra or out of field of view light. So I'm going to be bringing this with me, especially on sunny days. So what does this mean? This is a great lens. It has excellent sharpness, excellent sharpness. As 50 millimeters or 55 millimeters goes, this is right up there. Now you say, well, Boomer, what about 1.2? Well, I'm going to do a special 1.2 with this thing, more astronomy. I'm going to take some pictures, and I'm going to stack them too. In astronomy, they have this thing, stacker software, where you take a bunch of, suppose like you're supposed to track the stars because the Earth spins around. But, you know, if you don't want to get that involved with it, I could set it at f1.2. I could set this to 5 seconds, and there's no trails. And then I could take a whole bunch of 5-second exposures and use special software and stack them, and I could see more detail. So that's why I'm going to do a brief study of how does this perform at 1.2. I'm going to wait for a nice day in May or June when at night it's still almost the same temperatures inside. I don't have to worry about this thing having to go through any temperature differentials. So I want to eliminate that. So I'm going to do the 1.2 separate. So I was very pleased with this lens. They're readily available. Of course, they have the newer 1.2s. They have, I think they switched to 50 millimeters. And it has the NFD mount where you have to twist the whole lens off and on. And they have a whole plethora of them. They have just a regular 1.2 50 millimeter NFD, which I have because I want to compare it. I think this one has an extra element than the newer ones. Then they have an L lens too, which is astronomically priced because it has such discreet reputation. Now, what's the only drawback to this lens? It's heavy. Oh, there's a lot of glass, there's metal, it's heavy. Of course, luckily the camera weighs nothing, so that's great, you know, but it is hefty in and of itself. And I highly recommend a lens hood with it, unless you're only going to shoot it on overcast days and sort of like cheat a little bit. And what else? The Sony A5000 does not have electronic eye-level viewfinder. It just has this flip-up screen. And if you go out on a sunny day, it's hard to see the screen and focus and do all the stuff you have to do. So that's another reason why I went out on a gloomy day like this, where I was actually able to see what was happening on the screen. That's just this camera. It's a nice camera. They're available cheap. If you want to get into vintage lenses, I highly recommend it. Although it does have this, you know, it's like any point and shoot. But, you know, if you're in a manual focus mode, and you know, you hit the magnifying button and you're trying to focus, it's hard, a little bit hard in the bright sun. There's no doubt about it. And I find Zebra focusing aid useless. I don't even use it. Especially if you want to shoot like wide open at 1.2, 2, or 2.8, you're better off just using the magnifying view. And then with a little practice, you can nail it, and it's really perfect. And this is a really, really excellent lens, and it's a good combo with this camera, I think. And I could highly recommend it. This is for such a fast lens. And FL is readily available and in various grades or conditions, and they're reasonably priced compared to the newer 1.2s. And I highly recommend this lens. That's all I can say. It's a really, really good lens, and you could see in the samples following, and you can make your own decisions. And I just want to say in closing, so, oh, I heard about this lens, I read about it, you know, some people say this and some people say that. And, well, you know, just think, here's a fella, that's me, everyone's favorite boomer. And I went out and I bought this lens. And I actually used it, mostly for astronomy. But I said, well, you know, why don't I shoot some daytime pictures with it and see what it's all about? It's a really, really good lens. I mean, all right, it's got an extra f-stop 1.2. And so that means you could go do all sorts of fancy low light level stuff. And the caveat is the depth of field is very shallow. Shallow depth of field. Okay, 1.2. I mean, your depth of field is only going to be that wide at, you know, between 2 feet and like 6 feet. You can focus on someone's tip of the nose and their face is going to be blurry at 1.2, and that's not the fault of the lens. That's just the physical characteristics of that aperture. And when you stop down to f2, it gets rid of almost all aberrations it has. And it still has shallow depth of field, 2.8, even better, but it still has shallow depth of field. F4, well, you know, you got some depth of field there, especially if you're shooting stuff that's more than 10 feet away. You got quite a bit of depth of field, like say I was taking pictures across the street, as long as I was reasonably parallel and perpendicular to the buildings across the street, they were all in focus. 5.6 and F8, well, you get more depth of field. And that's about as good as it's going to get. When you stop down to 11 and 16, diffraction kicks in, and you get more depth of field, but it's ever so slightly softer because of diffraction and not because of the lens. So this is a really excellent lens. It's the build quality is outstanding. I think it has great optics. They're reasonably priced. The FL, I don't know. People say, oh, the FL, it's old. I don't want it. I want to get one of the newer ones. Well, the newer ones are smaller because they have one less element. And I'm going to do a study on that one next. I have to get a lens hood for it because it has some oddball thread diameter, filter thread diameter. This is, I think this is 55 or something. I forget what it was, 54. But this is an excellent hood for this. So, but, you know, you could talk about it all you want, except that I just want to tell you, I have this lens. I did the study for you, and you could decide. And you only got, every picture's only up for 5 seconds. It's an A and a B thing, where I did the full frame. I cropped it 16:9, shrunk it down to this movie format. And then I did a 1920 by 1080 crop, but no resizing of a corner, or maybe off center or even the center. And then you could see yourself with these results. And of course, I have a routine. I go to a couple different parts, a couple different towns, and this way they're not all exactly the same, but they're similar photo subject matter and under different lighting conditions and different seasons. So, and you could just compare it and look and see, do you want to get this lens? Well, you make a decision, because I tried to be as technically astute as I could be, and I explained to you what I did. And so, oh, well, that's another thing. Say it was sort of dark, and because it's overcast, I did do some autocorrect for colors. That's brightness and colors, but nothing else. So there's just that. I didn't sharpen them. I didn't play extensively with them. And many of them I just dumped right out of the camera onto the screen. But aside from that, you know, I wasn't trying to correct this to make you think this is a better lens than it is. This is a standalone lens, And of course, it's a highly corrected prime lens, and they're better than most zoom lenses. And this holds its own up all the modern stuff out there. It really does. So for a very reasonable price, you have an excellent 55 millimeter, and you don't have to buy another one. You don't have to buy a regular f2 and switch them out. Just buy this one and use this. Except it is a little heavy. You got to realize that. Maybe, weak people, maybe they won't like that because it's so heavy. So I said, why should I let this kick around in my gadget bag? I'm going to start using it. And of course, it's a 55 millimeter on a APS-C sensor, so that's more like an 80 millimeter and 35 millimeter equivalency. So you got to keep that in mind. So without further doggy-do, let's jump right into the photo samples, shall we? So what's my philosophy? I'm a philosopher photographer. My philosophy is take pictures or die. That's my philosophy. All these lenses, when I was a young man, say this, the 55 millimeter 1.2 FL came out in like the 70s. And I was just out of high school and I was broke and I couldn't afford any of this stuff at all. But now that I'm an old boomer, I could afford them, and they're reasonably priced. I mean, compared to modern 1.2s, you can't beat these. And I think the optical quality is just as good, really. So I went to the park, I brought my lens hood with me, and I was shooting at a couple of f4s, 5.6 and 11s, and I was shooting at ISO 800, so I could use a fast shutter speed, and I mentioned this before because I got the jitters, the old man jitters, and I was using like a 1/320th of a second, 1/400th of a second, 1/500th of a second. And I was using the focus magnifier. I don't use the zebra. I find zebras annoying. All right, the focus magnifier, is an extra 2 steps, but I get better results, I find. And this lens performed very admirably. I know the conditions were cloudy and the lighting was extremely even, and that I want to give this lens the best shot of what it could do, and it came out really good, really good. I did boost the contrast a little bit, or I hit auto adjust for contrast and brightness, but that's all I did. No sharpening at all. This is strictly how they came out of the camera. Of course, the Sony A5000 is sort of an older camera now, and their just in-camera adjustments are pretty gross. Like they only give you like 5 clicks, total to adjust like the sharpness or the contrast or the saturation, as opposed to other cameras. They have more clicks where you could adjust up and down. And I was just amazed at how sharp this thing is. Here's a perfect example. Look at the moss here. I mean, when it's in focus, it's perfect. Of course, that's the thing. The depth of field is very important. Depth of field is so important. I mean, you can't cheat the depth of field. So if the lens is out of focus, then you can say, oh, there's something wrong with this lens, but it's out of focus. But when this thing is in focus, it is super sharp. Oh, I love this lens. This downsample full frame, I wasn't in perfect focus, so that's why I didn't do any pixel peeping on it. We had all this rain after having a dry spell for a couple of weeks. Now we're getting all the rain to make up for it. And we're supposed to get some more rain, and there's flooding in certain areas where you usually get flooding. And that's the way it goes. And probably May will come and things will dry out again. And then we had a fire alert, and they've actually had some forest fires right before this rain came. So that's just the cycle you get. It's either dry or wet, or it's dangerous and you can get fires, or you don't have to worry about it. These walls were taken at f2. These are ancient astronaut walls. And look at this. This is a pixel peeping. That's excellent. F2. F2. This is excellent. Beautiful. I can't believe this. Unbelievable. It was too bright to shoot at 1.2, so f2 was close enough. I think this is 2.8 because it's more three-dimensional. and pixel peeping, that's great. It's a nice lens. It's a little heavy, and that's the only thing. It's heavy. But if you want to get a 50 millimeter vintage lens, you're better off getting this one, because when you want to do low light level, you need that 1.2. You got it. And it does perform really good with the star images, or the most intense test you could give a lens. And of course, if it goes through any temperature differential, if it goes from say a warm room to cold outside, well, you're going to have to wait a half hour for the thing to reach that temperature, because everything is expanding and contracting at different rates, and all the glass has to just move a couple millionths of an inch, and that's it. You're done. You're over with. You know, you're going to think you have a crap lens. So luckily, I didn't have to heat on in the house, because, well, I'm sure sort of a cheap bastard, and maybe it was in 65 inside, and when I walked outside it was 49, so there wasn't too much differential expansion of the glass and the metal, and the lens performed admirably, very admirably. Of course, that's not to say I'm not going to take this same lens out and shoot it on a bright sunny day and see how it handles in that situation, because you gotta. They say in the 40s and 30s and 40s, before they had lens coating was standard all over, most photographs looked like they were taken on cloudy days, because the lenses they had too many reflections. So it looked like in the 30s and 40s it was always cloudy, or so they say. I don't know if that's true or not. So I went to the town, and you could see it was very foggy that morning. And I was there very early, like slightly before 7 o'clock, and I didn't bring the lens hood with me. And I figured, well, everything was completely even. There's a little flare in the domino signs, if you notice. And I think they came out really good, really sharp. I mean, look at the sign, Cannonball Road. So that's from, I must have been like 100 feet away or something, easy. Here, look at the animal hospital. The steps are sharp, but the utility pole is slightly blurry, because I was shooting at f4 and it had a very narrow depth of field. Smoke shop, the Cardinal Cafe. This town, their mascot is the red cardinal. So everything's like cardinal. Even this weightlifting fitness place has their mascot, a buff cardinal. Now, you may see some grain, and that's from the camera. It's the A5000. It does have some grain. I bumped the ISO up at 800 and on some pictures, and you'll see grain. But look at the fine detail, the fixturing in the lamp. That's amazing. Here's a perfect example. I focused on the sign, but if you look at the barber pole, it's just slightly out of focus, and that's not because the lens is soft. It just wasn't in focus. And here's another example where it's further away, so I was going to get some more depth of field, and everything is much shorter, even though much sharper, even though I wasn't perpendicular. See, this is still sharper here. And then here I was more perpendicular, but I was like the trees. The trees are much closer than the building, and they're still reasonably sharp. I always notice that leaves come out muddled, and I always figure it must be the JPEG algorithm, how it compresses that. And all JPEGs seem to like straight lines and repetitious patterns. Of course, I was across the street. I must have been like 50, 60 feet away from this, and it came out really sharp. I was really amazed how sharp this came out. Did a really excellent job. Now, following these samples are going to be some short movies of the white water at the park, and you can stick around for them at the end. Now, you may notice that the exposure looks a little different here, because on the close-up I did autocorrect on the colors just to bring out the shadow detail, so you can see if it's really sharp or not. Same thing here in this B picture of these storefronts. And this lens really pulled through. Really pulled through. So yeah, look at the detail on this door here, the crappiness you could see. And here's a really tough picture, a brick wall with a staircase and a lamp in front of it. Nice lens, really nice lens. Look at the chip painting. This is, I forgot to put a B here, but look at the chip, the peeling paint, that it captured all that fine detail. I like this vase.